On Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019, Richard Parkes made a phone call he didn't want to make. He called the logistics base camp at Union Glacier to say, "Come pick me up." The decision to abort his expedition to ski solo from the Antarctic coast to the South Pole comes after 17 days of battling some of the worst weather this section of the continent has seen in years. He'd skied for over 300 miles, but his body just couldn't take it anymore.
I couldn't really get warm, my hands were cold, my foot was getting cold again. And after an hour, I decided to pitch the tent and get warm, and I think that was the decision for me then.
And while he's not reached his goal, his efforts have been extraordinary.
He did everything right, other than have a crystal ball on this year's weather systems in Antarctica.
In this episode, Richard tells us about his decision to stop. Plus, we hear from some of the people who know him best.
He will be devastated for a while, but at the same time, he'll roll with this, however hard it is.
This is Richard Parkes, Antarctica. Hello, I'm Vicky Blight, and this is the podcast which is following Richard Parkes' attempt to ski from the Antarctic coast to the South Pole, solo, unassisted and unsupported, as fast as humanly possible. And much as we feared, Richard has had to make the difficult call to bring his expedition to an end. As we heard in the previous episode, progress came grinding to a halt on New Year's Eve.
I hit an area of heavy snow again. I didn't quite have the physical strength to push through it like I did in the early stages of the expedition, which meant I wasn't able to move quick enough to generate body heat. And I also noticed that I had a loss of sensation in my left foot. So I pitched the tent, called it a day early, and got warm, and then sought to understand what the problem was. To cut a long story short, I have a small area of the ball of my foot and my left toe, which I have a loss of sensation in. It's not frostbite, but it is the beginning of a cold injury.
And that, coupled with the sheer exhaustion of pushing himself hard to keep in touching distance of the world record, was ultimately a setback he couldn't recover from.
I think the writing was on the wall then, really, and I've just been playing around sums and, options and decisions. And realistically, yesterday I tried to move again, and I skied for about an hour. And physically I was very weak. But the consequence of that was I couldn't really get warm. My hands were cold. My foot was getting cold again. After an hour, I decided to pitch the tent and get warm, and I think that was the decision for me then. A number of variables. Obviously, the conditions don't seem to be improving. It looks like we've got another more weather system coming in for the next few days. I've still got a long way to go, so it's not as if I have to dig in for a short period of time. I've got probably another 3 weeks ahead of me. And physically, a day or two rest, which is what I've had, isn't helping me recover enough really to move forward. And, this environment, it's really unpredictable. It's incredibly hostile, and it's not an environmental place to take chances. And I feel like I've pushed further than I'm comfortable pushing, and now it's the right time to make the right decision and pull the plug on the expedition.
Steve Jones from expedition logistics company ALE has been monitoring Richard's progress throughout.
He did everything right. His planning, his physical fitness training, his mental preparation, the way he engaged with lots of stakeholders and got lots of people involved in the project. He did everything right, other than have a crystal ball on this year's weather systems in Antarctica, which have been unprecedentedly bad. We haven't seen weather this bad for this long for, many, many years, at least 8, probably more than that. So he's just been exceptionally unlucky with the weather.
Richard talked about this unprecedented weather in an interview for BBC Radio Wales yesterday. To put it into some sort of perspective, he said, Antarctica gets 16.5 centimetres of snowfall a year. This year, we've had over 10 times that in a week. Another perspective for you, None of the solo expeditions this season have yet reached the South Pole via the Hercules Inlet route which Richard took. To date, only 2 have made the pole at all, Colin O'Brady and Lou Rudd, as part of their race to complete the first solo unsupported traverse of Antarctica.
For 2 weeks he's skied hard, he's got up every day, he's been outside for 15 hours and pulling his sled as hard and as fast as he possibly can do, and that's a fantastic achievement. And that takes great strength of character and determination and perseverance to actually get up each day and carry on in the hope that things are going to improve significantly and he can claw back some of those miles. And sadly, that just hasn't turned out. But he's still demonstrated all of those characteristics in larger volumes.
This is Richard's performance coach, Nicola Phillips.
When you're aiming to do this as fast as humanly possible, you have to start big.
Nicola helped Richard prepare to beat his own British record of 29 days. In fact, Christian Eider's world record time of 24 days was also a goal.
And so the training that he did, because he was in incredible shape going, and that extra strength work that he did was planned to get him over that first bit, to get into an area where he could then set up a rhythm and to have good reserves to draw on when he needed it. But for almost 2 weeks, he had to push at that maximum, sort of 9 out of 10 of your effort, if you like, for 12, 16 hours a day. And that is going to take its toll in the end.
And it did. As well as Richard starting to lose some sensation in his left foot, he had sores and ulcers in and around his mouth, displaying that his body was under serious strain. Also, before he stopped, he was unable to sleep for nights without the help of painkillers.
The multiple aches and pains that he's got, again, was something that he was expecting. But you add that onto these other things like the mouth ulcers, the nosebleeds. Those type of situations is showing that the body is under a lot of strain, which means that it's that much harder to recover from something that is a potential cold injury as well. So you start to put those factors together alongside the fact that the elements, there's no sign of that changing, that the conditions could get a little easier for him, then you start to put all those factors in to an equation to think, right, what have we got to do here? Richard, being the person he is, wouldn't stop this unless he knew there was no other way around that. And it is testament to his mental strength that he still has that ability to remain logical and to work out the risk assessment, if you like, and weigh up the pros and cons, and to give things a try and very careful monitoring, and to help him make that decision. And that's what he's done. And I think the fact that he can think clearly like that is amazing.
Another person grateful for Richard's clarity of thought is his fiancée, Jo. She told us what this last week has been like for her.
It started with seeing through the live tracking tool that he clearly stopped on one of the days, and it's worrying when that happens because you're not sure what's happened. It could be as simple, you're thinking, has he just taken an extended break, or has decided to repitch the tent, or has something more serious happened? We're able to communicate reasonably frequently, a couple of times a day, by text. And so I was able to get a text from Rich just saying that, he's been in a lot of pain, and that pain had got to the point where he couldn't continue skiing. And that's really hard because I know Rich, and he has a capacity both mentally and physically and emotionally to endure what most can't. And so when he says, I can't take it anymore, it's horrific. It must be horrific. And I was worried about how bad it was, because he talked about being so exhausted that it was taking a longer time to pitch his tent. And things like that may not sound so worrying, but actually, if he makes a mistake and his tent blows away, that's catastrophic. So knowing that he had stopped and that he'd pitched the tent and he was in the tent safely, that helps me have some perspective. It's hard not to worry, but it's more comforting when you know he's at least in the warm. And so then knowing that, and then understanding a bit more about how he was feeling, he's incredibly run down, numerous physical symptoms. He's not been able to sleep without painkillers for probably about a week or so, and his body, in the same way that all of us get run down from time to time, and we might get a mouth ulcer or a cough or something like that, he's experiencing those kind of symptoms of body breakdown, but just to a much more significant degree than is normal. I think what was hard was when he went again the day after he first stopped, to try and see whether, having had some rest, his body had been able to restore enough to keep going, and it hadn't, and he had to stop again. He really has given everything to it, and there is literally nothing left, and I don't think there's anything more he could have done.
So, after skiing 492 kilometres, 306 miles, in the most inhospitable conditions imaginable, how is Richard feeling about having to abort the expedition?
I'm incredibly disappointed. I'm frustrated, but equally this is what I do now, and the nature of these expeditions and the nature of aiming to achieve big ambitions is the uncertainty of the hostility of this environment, and that's part of the course out here. I'm a bit more philosophical about these things now. I'm confident that I can look myself in the mirror when I come home. I did the best that I could. I gave it the best that I could. I prepared well. I performed well out here. The sad thing is trying to reconcile, the effort that the rest of the team has put in back in Wales and back in the UK. That's the frustrating bit. But I come back to the objectives of the project, and Team Quest is always about learning and about inspiring and empowering others through adventure. And in some ways, we've got more learning and more things to talk about from the adversity of this expedition than we would have if it was, if it was straightforward. So there's always a silver lining to things, and I feel incredibly supported by the project partners and by the companies and individuals I've been working with. So as a team, we're incredibly unified, and I'm going home with my head held high.
Steve Jones from ALE.
One of the things I hope he gets, and people reassure him and tell him, is that taking on exceptionally difficult challenges and not succeeding can be just as powerful a story and just as an effective learning and giving him material to share with others and the schools and colleges he talks to and the students he's been working with. He's got as much of a valid story to tell as he would have done if he had succeeded. And I hope that he takes lots of things positively from it.
And that story, that inspiration for future generations, is what we'll talk about next time in our final episode of the series. But before we go, we'll leave the final word to Richard. And it's a message for you.
I've been in my own bubble here for a few weeks now, and to be honest, I've been into dark places, pushing very close to my max. And it's been one of the most brutal expeditions I've attempted. But to think that so many people back home have been not just following my progress, but sending messages of support, and it's really humbling. It's insane, in fact. And I've had a lot of the messages have been sent through to me, and I just want to say thank you to everyone that's taken time over Christmas to follow and to track what I'm doing and to take the time to send messages to support me. They mean the world to me, and I've tried to do you guys proud, and I hope that in the new year, this 2019, that you guys find the courage to set yourself a quest and to set yourself a challenge, and maybe I'll follow you on Twitter and the roles will be reversed, and I'll send you the little messages.
Many thanks for listening and for your reviews of the podcast. Click subscribe to get the next episode for free downloaded to your phone when it's ready. Don't forget you can also become part of the Team Quest community by following Richard's journey on social media, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Vicky Blight. Richard Park's Antarctica is a Bengo Media production for Team Quest.